Hi, and welcome to the latest Trending Tech podcast. My name's Jeremy Cowan. I'm co-founder of the telecoms and technology sites VanillaPlus.com, IoT-Now.com, and the EE, which covers artificial intelligence for the evolving enterprise. Together, these websites are our podcast sponsors. First, I want to thank you for joining today's sometimes serious, sometimes light-hearted look at digital transformation for enterprises. Okay, if you're anything like me, the name Rakuten Symphony probably brings to mind disruptive technology. Disruptive, that is, for anyone who's managing telecom services in the traditional way. Rakuten Group's Symphony brand has been a disruptor in digital business transformation for telcos since 2020, and our telecom site VanillaPlus.com has been reporting on Rakuten Mobile and later Symphony for years. Now, we all know that communication service providers, or CSPs, have never been more in demand than they are today, particularly for mobile services. Yet the irony is that they've never been under greater cost pressures as demand for new networks and services has risen with 4G, 5G, fiber, and Internet of Things networks. Frankly, who'd be a service provider in this scenario? Well, one analyst firm that we quoted on VanillaPlus.com only yesterday forecast that CSP's monthly average revenue per user, or ARPU, across both mobile and fixed broadband is actually set to fall in the next 5 years by 4.2%. And this revenue fall comes despite the fact that telcos need to spend a fortune on new 5G and all-fiber networks. One of our columnists, Tony Savas, compared it to communication service providers being in a permanently spinning hamster wheel. Telcos are trying to address the demand for ever-increasing connectivity speeds, but never see a margin-busting return for their efforts. So to help us unpick this problem, we have two expert guests on the Trending Tech podcast. First, I'm delighted to welcome back a long-standing friend of Vanilla Plus, Francis Haysom, partner and principal analyst at Appledore Research. Francis, it's good to have you here.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
And our other guest is Ravi Debussy, Chief Revenue Officer of Rakuten Symphony. It's his job to realize the company's dream of cloud-native, virtualized, open, agile, and cost-effective 5G networks. Ravi, a warm welcome to the Trending Tech podcast.
And the dream is no dream anymore. Thank you very much, Jeremy. It's great to be here.
Francis, are you in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, definitely in the UK. It's going to be sunny at the moment. I'm trying to keep my eyes away from the economic catastrophe that's going on around us at the moment.
Best to avert your gaze, I find, at the moment. And Ravi, where are you speaking to us from?
I am in Tokyo.
Well, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Well, before we unravel the challenge for CSPs, we'll take a look at two serious tech news stories that Francis and Ravi have found. And finally, when we've covered digital transformation, it'll be time for a bit of light relief in our closing section called What the Tech. Here we'll examine a couple of stories that amused or amazed us. Francis, I think you spotted something relevant to today's discussion. I think it was in several news sources. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, well, you briefly mentioned it, this sort of declining ARPU, really, that 5G isn't making this huge change in the profitability or the revenue for a telco. In fact, it's still declining, and not just 5G, but also fiber, which points to a major issue, which is that you've got this huge investment in both fixed and mobile technology, and yet the revenue from it is not picking up as a result of it. And we've got a challenge there. I think a number of things obviously come from that one. I hope one of the challenges is actually we're a very traditional industry, a bit like an oil tanker needing to change, and maybe when it comes to the real facts in the money area, that becomes an impetus to change what we do and the behaviour that we're doing in that area. The other thing I think it points to is this general thing is that really we've only really had one product to date, which is basically connectivity. If you really look underneath the bonnet in 5G, for example, all the new use cases are not that kind of consumer area. So really telcos thinking about different ways in which they can expose what they do, not just at the macro level, but much more at the micro level, be it things like geolocation, or things about making predictions about how people move around, for example, just thinking outside the box of connectivity. And I think at the end of the day, it also comes down to the key things of operational efficiency, that just getting rid of the overhead can be a major issue, and better ways and more flexible ways of monetization beyond just the either the minutes or the all you can eat plan.
Yeah.
Just a final thing, I think we just have to recognize that the clock is ticking on this thing. Telcos have a limited time to make this transition.
Yeah, true. So consumers are spending no more on 5G than they do on 4G. I mean, were the markets implicitly expecting a significant uptick from 4G to 5G revenues?
This is my personal opinion. I think the markets weren't. In honesty, if you look at the share price of a telco versus say, for example, a tech firm, they've been in the doldrums for a long time. We did some analysis on, say, the US companies. It's not in the right place for the technology. So I think the market still really has the telcos in that kind of utility position. I think this is more of a wake up call to the telco who to some extent have bought into the idea that yes, these new revenue streams are coming because it's a new technology.
Rabi, I'm going to stick my neck out here and say I'm guessing this doesn't come as a total surprise to you. What are your thoughts on it?
Definitely not. I mean, Jeremy, I've been in this industry close to 3 decades, and I have to tell you, these questions have been debated in the early days of 2.5G and GPRS, all the way through what we see now. We think about this issue and this problem in the industry slightly differently. We believe that in the future, connectivity is going to become a human right for everyone. And along those bits, I want to reference some of the key things that have happened over the last couple of months in leveraging satellite technology to provide ubiquitous coverage for the unconnected. And we can talk about that a little bit. But to come back to the ARPU, if you look historically over the last 2.5 decades, the ARPU has been on a decline year on year in all countries and all regions. And our thinking about this in our own mobile network is connectivity is going to drop somewhere near free for everyone and becomes a human right and just a basic kind of infrastructure right. Where operators should focus is deploying networks in a new way and operating it in a new way where their cost structure becomes the least in their industry so they can compete better on their costs. Let's call this your bottom line. And then increase their revenue stream through use cases and experiences. Because consumers today are not willing to pay a premium just to connect to data. They have so many alternatives. They could drop down to LTE if you give them an extra charge for 5G. They're looking for richer, more immersive, more valuable experiences. And we've seen this in 4G. In the early deployment of LTE, everybody was saying, hey, okay, I get more bandwidth, so what? But my network costs billions of dollars. So what did I do this? And then long and behold, in a couple of years after that, you have devices, you have tools, you have services, you have experiences that became available for you through that LTE capability that allowed new revenue streams. Unfortunately, many of over-the-top service providers took extreme advantage of that. And because of the legacy thinking and the legacy model of mobile operators, I think many of them missed out on the opportunity. I hope that as we transition now into 5G, we are not going to see many operators miss out on the opportunity to really disrupt their thinking, their operating model, and the way they look at the revenues and where they come from in a completely different way.
Mm. Interesting. Rabih, what's caught your eye in the serious end of the news feed?
Yeah, so the reason I mentioned connecting the unconnected, there is two pieces of news that have come about in the last couple of months. Two have really interesting initiatives and objectives. The first one is what was announced between Starlink in the program with T-Mobile in the US, but obviously Starlink, as they launched the program with SpaceX, they will start providing services directly out of space and connectivity directly out of space. Today, there is close to 3 billion people on this planet that are not connected by neither a fixed nor a mobile network. And I think there is a real demand. Now, unfortunately, those 3 billion people end up being in the kind of a tranche of customers that are not high-paying customers, and therefore they're not being addressed for many reasons, including the fact that they are so remote that you cannot reach them. This news came out in August. The second piece of news was the successful launch of AST's space mobile program, which we are very, very heavily involved in. And that happened on September 3rd. And we will be one of the first mobile operators in Japan that will leverage a native LTE signal coming directly from low orbit satellite to reach the consumers and the subscribers' mobile device. You will not need a satellite device to communicate through the satellite signal. And when that happens, which is supposed to be later on in the next few months, when that happens, you'll have now the ability to actually communicate through satellite and provide 100% coverage over a landmass. So this is two very examples of significant news that are happening in the industry right now.
Indeed. Of course, in the first case, that's text only, isn't it? SMS and MMS. Is that the same with AST?
And no, with AST, we will actually have native band 3 signal transmitted over Japan, covering the whole landmass of Japan, which will give us Rakuten Mobile coverage across all of Japan, 100% of it. And this will include voice as well.
Wow. Francis, what do you make of this?
I think it's very interesting. As I say, the Starlink one is definitely at this stage SMS, MMS, but also the over-the-top text apps as well. So that's interesting. And coming back actually to Rabih's comment about the unconnected, I think that's actually the way that you start thinking about the unconnected, is that we think about sort of streaming cat videos in high definition in Europe and the US. But actually, if we think back to actually some of the great leaps that mobile technology made, a lot of them were very simple text apps. It was the Indian farmer who could predict what the price in the market was going to be before he moved his animals or his grain to the market. So I think in many ways, we almost need to step back to that kind of level. The text and SMS connectivity can be totally transformational. So I think it's to Rabih's point, it's an important story there. This ubiquitous coverage where you've never had it before.
Well, we'll put the links to these stories wherever we have them into the podcast transcript in case anyone wants to follow up on this. All of which brings us to the heart of the podcast, where telecom operators are trying, as we said, to keep pace with rising expectations from customers and stakeholders. If you're a network operator, you'll already know the huge financial burden that comes with building out and operating complex, large-scale infrastructure. If not, buckle up for the next few minutes, because thankfully there are new technologies and new strategies that now make it possible to create that new kind of operator. Operators like Rakuten Mobile in Japan, 1&1 in Germany, Dish in the US. They have turned to Symphony in the hope of getting new benchmarks for speed, agility, operating efficiency, quality, security, customer experience. I'm sure I could go on. Rabbi, Francis is going to drill into more detail in a second, but could you do me a favor here for all of us? Can you set the scene for anyone who doesn't already know just how big is the challenge facing the network operators you work with?
The challenge is quite massive. On one hand, they have a huge task that keeps them busy day in and day out, 24/7, which is continuing to manage and operate their network and continue to manage the business along with it. And at the same time, they have to deal with these waves of additional tasks that they need to go through. And there's major waves that come through every about 10 years, which is moving to a new generation of radio network. And every new generation comes with its own new complexities, its own new protocols. So it's as if you're going back to the university again. Every 10 years, you go and get a degree in 4G, you go and get a degree in 5G. And now this is happening in 5G, but it's happening even at an exponential level of complexity, because for the first time in the last 3 decades, you have an opportunity to have an alternative to the old legacy standardized technology stack and equipment that is coming from the typical vendors that we know of. So there's currently, in addition to, okay, I need to now design and plan for 5G. I need to put together, the right timeline, the right phasing of this rollout, and the right monetization of it. I need to also make a decision about the alternative. And in order for me to make a decision for that alternative, I have to educate myself first and my team and the whole organization that there is something out there that can help me build a 5G network, introduce the new services without being locked in to one specific vendor, and leveraging the new tech such as commodity hardware, cloud native architectures, software centric applications, and reducing the cost of the radio access network, which is always the highest cost in rolling out new mobile networks, and introducing the new services that could be enabled by 5G, which brings 2 main advantages over the previous generations. The first one is ultra high capacity. 5G promises hundreds of megabits per second, theoretically gigabits per second, and ultra low latency. So now you can do things that could not be done in the past, because the responsiveness of that network is so fast that you could introduce applications that could not be introduced on your previous generation, whether it's 3G or 4G.
So, Rabbi, you have an extensive background with cybersecurity. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're seeing the discussion and approaches to security evolving in the telco space?
Of course, yes, Francis. I mean, look, this is a really sensitive topic, and I want to make it unsensitive, because the best thing to talk about these major concerns in the industry is through openness and collaboration. And we believe that there may have been some confusion around exactly what is being messaged around security. But let's talk about the principles of cybersecurity in the new 5G networks. And for the sake of time and for the sake of the debate and dialogue around this topic, I will park the standard on the RF side and its security parameters and its security implementation out of this discussion. And I believe there has been significant improvement over the generations as we move from 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G on the RF side, and how we secure the radio signal. And that is defined by 3GPP, obviously. So all radio vendors and all user equipment vendors will have to comply on both sides. What I want to talk about is Open RAN secure? Is it resilient? Is cloud secure? And is it resilient? And these are the questions that I typically get asked every single time I speak with a mobile operator. And let's be honest with ourselves. You wouldn't expect a CTO and a CXO and a mobile operator to go and be an expert in this space, because their job is really to make sure they manage and design and implement and operate their network, and that's a full-time job. So the way I respond to that is, let's look at the bigger picture. What happens in ORAN in Open RAN is you moved away from a monolithic system to a completely diversified system that is based on multiple collaborators into this space. And these companies typically are innovative companies that have come and implemented new tech and deployed it on commodity hardware using virtualization and cloud to leverage the cost benefits and the economies of scale. The second basis is there is no digital system out there that could be 100% bulletproof from any potential attack and any compromise. There's no such thing. If there is such thing, just show it to me, and let's see if we can learn from that. So I would say every digital system has potential vulnerabilities, potential attack vectors, and compromises, and therefore they should be looked at in different ways. So is ORAN more secure than legacy? Is legacy more secure than ORAN? That should not be the question. The question should be, what are the key vulnerabilities, and how can I build a resilient environment around those vulnerabilities so that, first of all, I detect, prevent, and respond to an attack. And second, I recover, and that's why it's resiliency, right? The most important thing is I recover quickly enough, and I am now more resilient than I was before, so that I don't get attacked by the same attack vector again. And these debates are not taking place. What is taking place is claims that simply because you move now to an open system, you use an open commodity-based hardware with a cloud operating system and a cloud automation tool and a lot of open source available in the operational stack, now you are vulnerable because there is a lot of vulnerabilities in those systems. Well, yes, but at the same time, you have tens of thousands of engineers in this communities of different open source communities or the Open RAN ecosystem that are developing tools and techniques to prevent and defend and harness and secure and harden the systems. Equally, you would say a legacy, a proprietary system is more secure simply because only one company develops it. Well, yes, but there's a flip coin to that, is when somebody discovers a vulnerability for it, and we have so many examples of those, and when you do get hit by an attack, the only savior that you can find is the actual company that built the product. And I've been in situations like this, and I won't mention names, but I've been in situations during my time in previous roles where a customer would call me up in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, Robbie, my network is down, and I really need to just bring it up. What can you do to help me?" And in some cases, actually, I have an example, and, honest to God on this, I was somewhere in a completely different region and different time zone. The customer calls me up and says, "You know what? I've got an outage and I need your help. And I am unable to reach my supplier because they are in Las Vegas on a sales conference. Everybody is in Las Vegas partying and I'm not getting a response." So look, in general, what I believe is the question of security needs to be a more carefully discussed question. And the principles still remain. And last but not least, I would raise one question back to the industry. If cloud is not secure enough for Open RAN to be deployed on it, why is it secured enough for airlines, banks, transportation, governments, oil and gas, our personal use, every single vertical, every single domain is using cloud. But when it comes to the radio access network that is supplied by a handful of vendors, thou shall not use cloud because it's not secure. Well, is your core deployed on cloud and a virtualized environment? In most cases, the answer is yes. Is your IT system, is your email system, is your OSS, is your BSS? Yes, 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 yes. Thou shall not deploy on cloud when it comes to ORAN. I wonder why 60 to 70% of the spend in telco takes place in RAN with a handful of vendors. So now that brings me to the question, is it really a big topic for debate, or is it just FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt?
We've been following Rakuten for a number of years with Appledore Research, and our opinion is that what makes Rakuten different is your focus on business need rather than technical standards. Is that a fair statement? And do you think that's an important part of going back to our previous question, successful transformation in traditional CSPs?
Yeah, I mean, look, our DNA is totally different. We come from, as a company, I spent all my life in telco, but we come as a company from a different DNA, different background. We come from a digital innovator that has, introduced e-commerce to Japan and became a global multinational successful player in 70 odd distinct businesses. But what is so common among all of our businesses is they're all digital facing businesses. We don't have traditional legacy businesses. And our entry into the telco space started as an MVNO, but then very quickly our chairman and CEO said, if in order for me to make money and own my own destiny in this space, I have to manage and own my own network. And thus, in 2018, we made the decision. 2019, we started the rollout. And then April 2020, launch of 4G. And September of 2020, launch of 5G. So if you think about it, I guess your statement is correct to a certain degree. I mean, obviously, Francis, we're now a mobile operator. So we are compliant with 3GPP standards. We have to be with the government, with the local regulators, the global standards, the community standards, GSMA, and so on for roaming and all those great things. But at the same time, we're pragmatic business people. And when we started exploring the cost of building a 4G, 5G network, we scratched our head and thought, this is just astronomical. There's no way we're going to spend that amount of money. Is there an alternative to do it? Now, in 2018, the alternative wasn't mature enough. And therefore, yes, we were not, i.e., quote unquote, compliant. But now the whole industry is moving in that direction. And we were spearheading the movement of ORAN. And now ORAN is becoming more mainstream. So because we were pragmatic, we said, you know what, let's do it. Let's move into that area because we believe in democratization. We believe in no dependency on one single vendor and one single source. And we believe in openness at the end of the day. And it made perfect sense for us, for our network. And long and behold, the most recent third-party benchmarkers, Umlaut or OpenSignal, comparing ORAN in Tokyo, our network in Tokyo, to so many different markets and cities around the world. It is not just really standing up to the others. It is up there in the top 10th, top 6th percentile, which is amazing in less than 2 years of operations. So if it does make sense for us, and if it's not among the mainstream of technologies, but it's something disruptive and innovative, we make a conscious, pragmatic decision and go after it. We're not restricted to the legacy thinking. And this is the mindset shift and change that I was alluding to earlier, Francis.
Ravi, automation seems to be at the center of everything that Rakuten Symphony is doing, almost the defined goal for Rakuten Symphony. How is that changing your conversation with operators? And could you kind of characterize what you see as the difference in your approach versus what a lot of telcos are doing at the moment, which is kind of mechanization of what they do?
Yeah. Thank you, Francis. So I have a lot of discussion around automation in general with industry players and mainly MNOs. In a nutshell, the way we think of automation and orchestration, and the way we automate and enable the network to, first of all, heal itself, scale itself, manage itself, and operate itself. And this is a grandiose vision, by the way. Nobody could achieve that today, but I think we've made really good headways into that direction. And it's good to have such a bold vision. I'll reference that in quantitative ways. So we currently have over 51,000 macro radio stations or macro sites in Japan, and that continue to increase every single day. We launch new sites. And total radio emitting devices or base stations is near 300,000. So it's not a small network by any means. Now, the team that operates the network around the clock, 24/7, is no more than 250 to 300 people. And that is one quantitative measure that I want the listeners to pay attention to. Because in traditional sense, in traditional ways, you would need thousands of people to manage and operate that network. And I think the MNOs that come from this legacy environment would understand that. The second thing is, Francis, now with the advanced technologies that we're deploying, most importantly, cloud automation and cloud orchestration, designing software in a true cloud native architecture that is microservice-based approach that abstracts the underlying enablers of data, connectivity, data lake, database systems, etc. Abstract that from the application to make it thin, agile, easy to deploy, easy to spin up in a virtual machine or a container, easy to shift from one server to the other, from one data center to the other. These dynamics are unheard of in the legacy environment. Now, in the enterprise space and the public cloud domain, we see this magic happening every day. You have no idea where your iCloud sits. If you want to find out, you could call Apple and ask them. They probably don't know, because this is the beauty of cloud. Cloud is an aggregate and a pooling of compute, network, memory, and storage that becomes available as a commodity so that it can be consumed in smaller units. It could be democratized so that communities use the same common infrastructure. Now, you have to make it secure and you have to do all of that around it, but this is magic. Now, that magic hasn't made it into the telco space. And now as we do this and we start thinking about the possibilities of shifting workloads, the baseband unit used to be a monolithic system sitting at the base of a cell site. Now it is nothing but a mere software that is sitting on some server in nearby closet, dark room. And let's say that dark room gets knocked out. You could shift that to another dark room in a different location. Now, in the past, it would take you days, potentially weeks, depending on which country we're talking about, to make that shift. Today, it takes us minutes. And in the future, it should take us seconds. And we know the formula for that. It's not like we're speaking out of, just nowhere, out of vapor. These are examples that can be looked at. And I believe this is where the excitement and the light bulb starts coming on, and people's little flicker in their eyes go like, are you serious? I can really do this? The network can auto scale out and become higher capacity, or scale in and become lower capacity. It could auto heal in case of failure and disruption or attacks. It could auto operate. Eventually, if we put more AI into it, it could auto design. In fact, we have some early measures and early signs of, in the RF planning and optimization, this is an ongoing task that is typically done by humans and machines. So you have to have the tools, but you have to have the RF engineers that have, a lot more hair than I do. And most of it is usually gray. And, as they do this RF optimization and RF planning, it is a combination of the two coming together. There is the possibility now of doing RAN optimization, RF planning in a near 100% automated way. We're not there yet 100%, but in near. So we invite a lot of the potential customers and the industry players to come and visit us and see firsthand. And I always start with this, Francis and Jeremy. I always, when I'm talking about this topic specifically, I show first and then I talk about it. And that is really a great advantage that we have. Not only we're providing the whole life cycle of managing a mobile network, the platform that helps you manage that whole life cycle of your network, but also we're providing the tech stack, and we are a mobile operator ourselves in our domestic market. So it's not like we're talking about it from theory and books and ideas and PowerPoint slides. We live this day in and day out as a mobile operator.
Ravi, Tarek, I mean, the CEO of both Rakuten Mobile and Symphony, is on record as saying he wants to take the telco cloud solution to operators, to governments and enterprises right around the world. And you've done a deal now with MTN in Africa. Can you just briefly give us an overview of what the particular challenges are here?
Yeah, so in general, we haven't done a deal with MTN South Africa. We announced that we are signing a memorandum of understanding, and we did that back in Mobile World Congress to conduct O-RAN proof of concepts and trials across numerous properties in Africa. And these activities are progressing, and they have been progressing. Hopefully in due time, we can announce more great things. But yes, we are, Jeremy, if you recall, back in March of 2022, we announced the acquisition of Robin.io, which is a US-based small cloud innovator. Now, historically, we had deployed Robin.io in our network in Japan and have seen the tech and really understood it. And that's why we made that decision. And now we're doing the same for our clients globally. And that is going to be our default cloud, telco cloud stack that we will use, especially when it comes to the RAN. Now, this telco cloud technology is also applicable to enterprise. It could be applicable to industries and other verticals. And we are starting to see the interest in the enterprise side of things in other industries as well. So we believe this is a very important area. The second piece is the operating system. We believe in openness and communities and open source. And Tarek has spoken very openly about this, and we are engaged in very serious and meaningful ways with our existing clients to also evaluate alternatives that, basically continue this legacy spirit of keeping at least a highly capable, effective, high-performance operating system, whether it's a Linux operating system or a Kubernetes stack, that is always available for anybody free of charge, and supported and tested and validated by the community, and potentially supported through small companies that will benefit from that as well. So we're strong behind those kind of principles and that mission, Jeremy.
Okay. Ravi, thank you for that. We've reached the tech section of the pod, where we can unwind for a moment and see what in the world of tech has amazed or amused us lately. Ravi, I'm going to ask you to go first. What have you seen?
Just recently, the discussion with the headlines around Metaverse with Mark Zuckerberg. And, I won't get into the details, but I think somebody said, will Mark Zuckerberg find himself on virtual legs with Metaverse? And I believe I found Mark Zuckerberg's real physical legs, and I'm going to call that the edge cloud. And I think that's going to be what's going to make Metaverse and other new, very, very rich and very demanding experiences a reality, by deploying edge compute, storage, and network, and bringing the network closer and closer to the users.
Yeah. I recently wrote a piece for issue 5 of Vanilla Plus magazine. From conversations I had, it became clear that the metaverse is evolving pretty fast. But I must say, one of the things that interested me was that discussions on it used to focus mainly on the gaming industry. And now today, everyone's talking about collaborative work within enterprises and small to medium businesses. I did not anticipate that. But so that was my amazement when I started doing some research into this.
I mean, if you think about it, you've got your ultra high bandwidth, ultra low latency, bring them to the edge. The closer they are to your customer, the more enriched the experiences are going to be. And metaverse is just one use case.
Jeremy, I think it's one of those classic things, which is the opportunity is often overestimated in the short term versus actually what happens in the long term. I think the most interesting, you hinted at that sort of, it was all about gaming, but now it's about enterprise. I think the challenges that the metaverse face is that kind of gaming world is a kind of social network. The issue with the enterprise is it's not one single thing. It's lots of different things. And it's I guess it's a bit like 5G almost. The Meta is having to face the same thing. It's not this single thing that's being used to developing. It's lots of things, lots of variants, and almost definitely in partnership with everything rather than owning everything. So interesting sort of correlation between the two areas.
Thanks for that, Ravi, and thanks, Francis. Francis, you had a story, I think, of your own to offer at this point.
Yeah, the one I was going to point out, which I thought was a lovely technical consequence that are not foreseen, was the lovely story about the lady with the new iPhone 14 who initiated the crash detection feature on her phone, which is obviously for car crashes, but actually she was on a Big Dipper in an amusement park at the time.
On a roller coaster.
It's a lovely sort of case of unforeseen consequences. And maybe here's the serious point about it. It's a great one in which context is everything. And actually the telco has that context. The iPhone on its own doesn't know that it's on a Big Dipper. The telco knows it's in an amusement arcade and it's not in a car and all that kind of context. So maybe an opportunity in there. One is to make the crash detection better. I think the final one, which actually only occurred to me last night, and I think it's both funny but also a kind of wake up call to the industry, was I was watching a historical mockumentary on the BBC Netflix last night, talking about the history of the Dark Ages in Europe. And this quote came out of nothing, which said, "The Dark Ages delayed the rollout of 5G by centuries." It just cracked me up. But if somebody is talking about 5G rollout in a mockumentary, the industry really needs to wake up as to its messaging and how it's achieving 5G rollout.
Love it. It's been great chatting with you both. So let me say a big thank you first to Ravi Debussy of Rakuten Symphony. Thanks, Ravi.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. It was a pleasure.
And how can people reach you for more information?
We've got the website, and I'm on LinkedIn, and Ravi Debussy, and there's only one.
And thanks also to Francis Haysom. It's been a pleasure, as always, to have you with us, Francis.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's been a great conversation.
And where should listeners find you if they want to?
Obviously, the website, appledoorresearch.com, and I can be got on LinkedIn through Francis Haysom.
Great. And thank you, too, to our amazing audience all around the world. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Trending Tech podcast wherever you found us today. So until the next podcast, keep safe, keep checking IoT-now.com, the EE.ai, and vanillaplus.com, where you'll find more tech news, plus videos, top-level interviews, event reviews, and much, much more. And join us again soon for another Trending Tech podcast looking at enterprise digital transformations. Bye for now.